hoping tonight we can put a little bit of flesh to if you're not feeling it. If you are feeling it, that's great. You're moving in the right direction. So I've got some good news and bad news. The good news, I'll be here to help you. The bad news, I'm going to get out of here fast tonight because I am going to Alaska tomorrow morning early.
What are you going to bring us when you come back?
That's
Huh.
Salmon.
He didn't check with me. Did he check with you?
What are you bringing us?
I'm jealous.
Well, that's, we'll
It's
see
gonna
about
be
that.
cooler there, probably.
Can you bring snow?
Average temperature right now
Can
is
you bring-
71.
Can you bring some? Oh, okay. I guess it's not snow temperature.
You can bring the heat back with
See,
you.
but isn't it still part of summer, so it's going to be light?
That
Oh
totally
my god, you
sucks.
can bring some, you can bring us like
I have to
water.
agree with you on that one. So, it's 2 or 3 in the morning, you think it's like 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. But that's part of the fun of going to Alaska during the solstice summer, and that sun just doesn't go down.
You could bring us a baby polar bear if you want.
I'll do my best.
That might be a little hard to get through customs.
No way.
But anyway, so I'm motivated to get out of here for 2 reasons. One is I want to get home and pack. My bride's waiting for me to do that because we have an early departure tomorrow morning. 2 is I want to get out of this inferno. How about you
Don't
guys?
blame you.
Yes.
This
Oh,
feels
God.
a lot nicer than my house, so.
Yeah, but it is nice in here. So I'd love to get out of here as early as possible, which means I'm going to cover real fast the information we need to cover, and then I'm going to be available to you. I want to spend most of the time tonight being available to you, obviously, for the purpose of your consultation. Next week I'll bring in some more materials. I thought about bringing it tonight and decided against, but next week I'll show you the POD for those of you who might be interested in that. Tonight we're going to take a look at some PowerPoint examples, what not to do. And so that's principally why we have them on Moodle, what not to do. And so that you're comfortable with your PowerPoint practice next week, which I'll talk more about in a little bit later. So I'm anxious to split, not because I don't want to see it, but I've got a little bit of anxiety about getting ready and getting to the airport tomorrow morning. And my Deb is anxious for me to come home and give her a hand as well. So I'll try to be as effective and as efficient as I can for you all, so that I can spend some one-on-one time on you, but my heart's to get out of here. Okay, so let me pray for you. God, I pray that you will bless our night tonight, and this would be a time that we can accomplish that which you put before us for your glory, for their joy. Bless each person in this room. Work through me in a way that I can, in fact, be both effective and efficient. The yoke of Christ falling upon each of our shoulders, particularly my young students who are grappling with going out into the world and becoming consultants to the real world of business, and using the theories and constructs and applications of each of these classes to bring about joy into the hearts of entrepreneurs in this community. God, may you bless them and give them insight and understanding to do the work you called them to do. That they, those to whom you have called to consult, would be blessed, and that their business would mature and grow and be a enterprise consistent with the work that they've put into it. So bless this night, I pray. Those in this room who are struggling at home or at work, children with significant others, may you work mightily in their life. Intercede for them, I pray, Lord God. So I thank you for this evening. In Christ we pray. Amen. So I've got one more chart of accounts sitting up here on the white screen that you ought to be pretty proficient with building both a balance sheet and an income statement. So let's take just a few minutes of time and go through that. It'll be our last example this week of both a balance sheet and income statement. My hope is that you are going to feel comfortable with that. Then we'll move into what we're going to do for the rest of the night. Let's start with that. First group who calculates net income and also the accounting equation will earn 50 extra credit points. Say that one more time. The first group can calculate net income and the balance sheet as long as you didn't do the work ahead of time.
You had it up. Open season.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Wait. You probably started just a little bit ahead of time.
Even if you're just a little bit ahead of time, let me give you just another minute or two income statement. Do you think you've got it? Coming up now. Both of them. Come up now. You got one of them, go for it. Fill in the blanks. Careful with this one, the net income, it's a bit tricky.
Can I just do it alongside her?
Uh-huh.
Perfect. I don't have an address
I'm confused.
No, I No.
So they're just doing the same thing on the same side.
One should be doing the balance sheet, the other, are you doing both sides? Or just one
Yeah.
side? Alright, just go for it, earn some credit. Anybody can do the balance sheet? Do a balance sheet now, huh?
I don't have an energy drink.
I can see that.
Oh, snap.
And
Go for it.
then I had about 5 more after that. I've been looking at this stuff since Saturday.
Make it happen.
I know. See, caffeine, that's it.
In the interest of being truthful, I have it on my phone.
It's fine. Do the net income.
Yeah.
Good.
You could have just copied what Jenny's
I
writing.
know.
Yeah, but see, she was right here and I was
trying to
wrong.
be-
Oh.
I was trying to.
Is that 340?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever you're drinking, it is working.
It's because I've been looking at this stuff for 15 hours a day since Saturday.
Wow.
Okay.
Oh, but I think I just figured it out. Can I correct myself verbally?
No.
My goodness.
Not.
With all due respect.
Shut up your face. Enough of that respect. All right, so, is this correct? Is it correct in that she's identified net income as 70,000 rather than as operating income? Yes or no? That was a bit of a trick, yes or no?
No, I'm not correct.
Well, you did it, so why are you now countering what you just did?
I don't know.
Stop it. believe in what you did.
Is it right?
Affirm it, because it's right. It is right because what two expenses or three expenses typically do we have after operating income? In order to get us at net income, we need an interest expense, tax expense, or usually depreciation expense. We don't have any of those in our chart of accounts, and because we don't have that, right, we eliminate the operating income bottom line, and we call that our profit, our net income, right? And therefore, the way that it is indeed reflected here as a net income is correct. Sometimes I see students doing it up here, recognizing the rule that when we don't have a business that shows operating income with earnings before interest, taxes, and or depreciation, they actually show this as the operating income. Is not the case. Again, the rule is the business is not showing earnings before interest, taxes, or depreciation. That bottom line will be net income. So nicely done on that. Good assessment on that. Leave me a little note with all of the group names on your piece of paper to denote that you've done this. This is done very, very well. Right on point. Assets, in fact, do equals liability plus shareholders' equity. Certainly easy to calculate shareholders' equity when we have common stock and we have retained earnings. Sitting down here, that's a fairly easy calculation to take a look at. So current liabilities, current assets, long-term liability, long-term assets, and current assets. Done well. 114,000 is right. So yeah, that's good. Looks good. Bit of a boo-boo on this one though.
Yes.
Just a bit of a mistake on that, but I think that's just a mathematical mistake. Yes. Easy calc on that. Why you did the error there? You brought down that 280 instead of subtracting it from the gross margin. But gross margin is a big deal, and I've talked a lot about that. I've also talked a lot about the difference between gross margin and profit margin. What is the difference between gross margin and profit margin? So you should know that. Gross margin versus profit margin. What is profit margin a function of? What two elements in the income statement is profit margin a function of? What else? Close. Operating income, that's correct. These two here, sales and operating income, the two of these, that's a ratio we're looking at when we look at profit margin. Profit margin is not the same as gross margin or gross profit. Profit margin is a relationship between how much income we're generating after our expenses and our cost of goods sold relative to our sales. All of this is factored into our operating income. It's a relationship between this bottom line and that top line. This is a real bottom line down here, but this is the relationship. Operating income to sales is profit margin. You should be languaging or thinking about languaging profit margin if you're looking at your balanced scorecard. And one of your perspectives is the financial perspective. You want to at least argue on some level what the profit margin is of the company you're looking at, and by way of peer review, how does it compare if you can do that, or by past performance. Certainly you'll be able to do that. So well done on that, and on both sides. So both groups, make sure you leave me a note reflecting your competency with this. It will benefit your entire group for extra credit tonight. Okay? If you have not handed in your homework, you should do that now. It's up here on the very front end. And secondly, if you are interested in taking a look at your managerial econ file, I did bring that, and those papers are sitting over here in the corner. If you want to look at that on your break, you're willing to do that. As long as you give those back to me, you can take them to your table or to your spot and take a look at those. I do have these examples sitting up here this week as well. You're welcome to take a look at these, take a picture of these, and to get at least an idea of what my expectations are, and I'm going to cover that this evening so you're crystal clear on that a little bit more thoroughly. All of you should be very comfortable with doing an income statement and a balance sheet. You're learning, if you don't already know this, that the income statements and balance sheets that you're looking at in the real world are far more comprehensive than what we're looking at here, but at least we've got some structure that you can talk intelligently with, and I trust that that's been helpful for you. Okay? So that will be it for the competency for this class in terms of constructing both of these, and again, I trust that you have some comfortability with that. Graduating with a business degree, I would at minimum think that you have some capability in this. You demonstrate some confidence in the future when you're looking at both of these. All right. Somebody hit the second bank of lights in the back, so it's a little bit darker in here. I appreciate that. From the corner. Turn off the lights, thank you. All right. The objective of taking a few moments and pausing out of our book and into the PowerPoint slides this evening is to give you an idea of what moving in the right direction with a PowerPoint presentation looks like, what are some strengths and some weaknesses. I've referenced this particular company in the past as one that we've done some work with. And now I wanted to show you how the consulting team built their PowerPoint. When you are thinking about your PowerPoint in general, and you are grappling with slide number 1, it's important that you consider your audience. In fact, it's important you consider your audience in general when you're building these slides, but slide number 1 is going to be particularly important. Because in the first slide, you want to demonstrate to your audience that what they're about to see is indeed the company that you have consulted with. And there's really no better way to do that, frankly, than to have their image, their brand, their logo, picture of their building, picture of something that is demonstrative of their enterprise. And tell me why you think that would be important. Shining up here on the white screen 5, 10, 15 minutes before your presentation. Why would that be important? Advertisement would be one, but why would it be important to the person sitting in the back who may be coming a little bit earlier? Does identifies immediately with that. He or she knows that what he or she is walking into is in fact a discussion about their business, but it gives them face, gives them respect, right? Gives them sort of the idea that they are sitting and ready for a discussion about their business. So slide number 1 ought to be fairly obvious to you. It ought to be one in which demonstrates who the business is and what they are. I'm not interested in a mission statement. I'm not interested in a vision statement. Business owner sitting in the back is not interested in a mission and vision. Why would he or she not be interested in such a thing? They own it, for Pete's sakes. That's exactly right. So don't try to convey to them what they already know. It's a waste of their time, and it's a waste of my time, and frankly, it's a waste of this class time. So you don't spin their wheels by giving information they are already aware of. They're sitting there because they want to find out what information you've distilled and is new to them. But that very, very front page should represent that. This doesn't do a bad job, but it's not a great job. And so keep that in mind, that while this does give the indication that they're going to be doing, or they did, a presentation concerning Viva Downtown, it is not the best slide for that.
What is Viva Downtown?
It's a restaurant,
Oh, okay.
yeah, in downtown Reading. At least it was. I don't think there exists any longer.
It's an event.
It is. That's right, event planner, that's correct, thank you.
There's still going strong.
I'm actually thinking of a different business than Viva Downtown.
Big market fest.
That's
Oh,
right.
okay.
Your second slide should be focused in on, very quickly, on who you are. So that while the first slide is about them, your second slide is about you. It's your team, it's your consulting team. This is an opportunity for you to get at, in slide number 2, to get at very fast who you are and to make the introductions to your group, make the introductions about your group, who did what, who the participants are, what their role is, what their fictitious title might be, or what they may have actually did do or did not do, although I talk more about what you did do rather than you did not do at that time, frankly, while you did the consultation work. This group did a very good job, I will tell you, using a template that got at this sort of puzzle building phenomena here as a wallpaper. I think they scored quite high in that, and did a good job with at least getting at getting the attention of the person sitting in the back and the audience in general using that wallpaper.
That's not actually them, is it?
Pardon me?
Are the little people them?
No, it's not. No, but that would have been cool if they could have done that, but it's not. These are borrowed images for this particular team. The fictitious name you see demonstrating here, they even had a slogan that they used. And a nice touch on these PowerPoint slides is incorporating the image of the organization somewhere in the slides in one of the quadrants. In the real world, this is what you do in the consulting world in general. When you're building a PowerPoint presentation, is you have represented somewhere in the slide representation of the organization that you're consulting with. Again, it gives them face, it gives them respect. They feel as if you've put some time into this presentation, including the details, and that is part of the details. So slide number 1 is about them. There really is not a whole lot of discussion about that. It's shining up here bright in their face. It gives you the sort of the introduction slide where you really don't have to say anything other than having it up there as you compose yourself, getting ready for your presentation. Slide number 2, on the other hand, does get at talking about your consultation and with specificity about you. Introduce the players, so on and so forth. These 2 slides, specifically slide number 2, you ought to be in and out very, very quickly. But again, a good place for you to give that introduction. Slide number 3 is your transition slide. It's the one where you want to very much get their attention. And where you're going to get their attention is with this idea of the balanced scorecard. This is where that's going to come in. You're going to foreshadow that and get into that. When you're structuring your slides, therefore, you want to talk about them, talk about you, and talk about very, very soon the issue. You want to get at the issue fairly fast. They're sitting in the back wondering about that, and you don't want to bore them to death with a bunch of details absent getting at the issue. You want to get at the issue pretty darn fast. Take a look at slide number 3 and see if they've done that or not. See if these folks began to move towards getting at the issue after they introduced themselves and introduced the business to the owner sitting in the back. Did they get at that? No. What they used the slide to do is what they should have done in slide number 2. They used slide management time to introduce the parties. You don't need to do that. Don't waste your time either creating and or putting together a slide about your participants. You can take care of that orally in the previous slide. There's no need to go through slide number 3. So slide number 3 here didn't get into the issue. In fact, they used slide number 3 to talk about them. Right? Okay. Slide number 4 is foreshadowing. They went through sort of the steps of what they're going to talk about. Again, we don't get at here very well, nor did we get it in the presentation about the issue. At about this time, the guy sitting in the back is really wondering what you all discovered. They're a little bit patient with respect to that, but you haven't got at this. Better presentations, and in the real world when you're doing consulting, is you give them a glimpse, you give them a view of what you may have discovered. That's why the balanced scorecard is so important beginning to get at early on, because in addition to talking about the perspectives, maybe not so much about the fire and or the smoke that's going on, with these perspectives. but largely about what's going on here in the middle is important to get at fairly early. That gets at the issue. You don't have to talk a lot about the issue, but you certainly can talk about stuff that you may have discovered that is problematic. Now, I don't think it's a bad idea to talk about what you're going to talk about. We talked about foreshadowing in the class that you were in with me, but we didn't do the Google case study. We talked a little bit about foreshadowing. It's not a bad idea to talk about what you're going to talk about. You can do a little of that once you get here. If you want to give them the pop in the third slide, and then up here on the fourth slide, transition into your foreshadow, you're okay to do that. I'm not opposed to that approach to where you foreshadow and talk about what you're going to talk about once you give them an insight what's going on here. But you want to get at very quickly, very fast, the balanced scorecard. You want to get at unlocking that. Better presentations then spend very little time on slide number 1. They let the slide talk. Spend very little time on slide number 2 and by way of introductions, but pop it right here. Fast, quick. This is what this thing is. And men and women sitting in the back, or gentlemen or ma'am sitting in the back, the issue we discovered, the problems we discovered, which we're going to illuminate in the next 25 minutes are. And that gets you then to transition into the slide to talk about with specificity what you're going to talk about. All right? So very good groups with high point value particularly, but more importantly, getting at a place where they get the attention of people sitting in the back are the ones that do a bang up job right there. Okay? That's where it's at. If you want to spend some time then in figuring out how to give a dynamic presentation, this is where it begins, right there. It's why that POD display that I've been talking about, again, I will bring it in next week. You can produce these things quickly. Send them electronically to Office Depot and they'll do them for you in hours. It's not that big of a deal. You just come up with a template and figure it out. But that POD display, that might be covered. That's nothing more than the balanced scorecard, for example. Again, I'll show you 2 examples next week. Might be covered. You unpack that, bring it up as you are shining slide number 3. And that's where you want to use the analogy technique. And I told you Hue and Cry used a very interesting analogy technique by showing buildings that were normal and a couple of them that were smoking, one that was smoking and one that was on fire. That's a place where you want to be able to use that as well. If you've got creative ideas or you've got actual physical ways of doing that, set them up out here. Try to show you an example of that in a one that was videotaped many, many years ago where they used a number of objects to get at that analog of talking about these quadrants relative to their business. Yes, Raul?
So we're gonna have a tripod to hold our display?
You should bring a tripod in. We'll try to do that, but one of you or 2 of your groups should bring them in for the benefit of all the groups. Okay? Bring a tripod in if you don't have one. I've got one. If I can remember to bring one, I'll do that. Okay? All right, so we're 4 slides into this thing, and we really haven't gotten into the issue. And then we get right smack into a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Right smack into a problem. This is exactly the way it was presented in the presentation. Precisely the way you see it here, which significantly impacted the presentation in general. The entire group was stunned. It was as if somebody hadn't paid any attention to this, and the rest sort of let it go by not having more than one set of eyes on the PowerPoint presentation, and this was the result of it. It was pretty much downhill from here because the group just had a hard time overcoming this particular issue. Again, we're not getting at the bang here yet. To the contrary, what we're getting is a whole bunch of what the issues are, a whole bunch of what the collateral issues are without really getting down with any concise argument on what the principal issue is. Obviously, there was things here that dealt with the financial perspective, and boy did they do it. So sitting in the back, this poor fella and his assistant were introduced to ratios that are frankly above most undergrads, let alone an entrepreneur. And they were going through these ratios to talk about the appropriate ratios, which are right to do, but not at this level, not at this point. So they went right smack into a various ratio analysis to talk about what they perceived to be the issues, without even getting into the balanced scorecard. In point of fact, as you go through here, you begin to see nothing more than a lot of financial analysis, absent really getting at what the principal issue is. Very difficult presentation. Very difficult presentation. If you look at this closely, you can see why it's difficult. You see examples of what I'm talking about here. This gets at the solution. And then, of course, they summarize. Okay, so a lot of problems with this, but there are some positives. And a big positive I would put on this is the selection of the wallpaper. They did a great job on the selection of the wallpaper in integrating Viva Downtown on all of the slides. Where this group failed miserably, frankly, was in slide management. Far too many slides, A, and B, not getting anywhere within this presentation at the balanced scorecard. So slide 1, 2, and 3 are key. But slide 3 is going to be the big one, because this is where you're going to be transitioning. You're going to transition right from here into there by introducing the balanced scorecard and getting at very quickly what you think the issue is, or what you thought the issue was. And that can transition to slide number 4 if you choose to use slide number 4 to foreshadow, that is, to talk about what you're going to discuss in the slides remaining. Yes, Joe?
What would you consider an optimal amount of slides for a PowerPoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. The better presentations are the ones that rely more on you and your orality than they do on the slides.
Okay, so shorter
Less
is
the better. Less the better.
Okay.
Less the better. Okay? Let your document that you've produced do a lot of the speaking for you after the fact.
Right,
Use that as a tool. That's all you're going to do. Use that as a tool, and this is a tool, but you own the presentation.
right.
You articulate it. It just comes out of you, and you're using this as your as sort of collateral tools. If you rely on this principally as your argument or your point of view, you're going to be in trouble. That suggests to me that you haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about the business. The better presentations are the ones that say to themselves, oh, by the way, oh, by the way.
Right.
What does that mean? They're saying, I know this so well, listen to me. And they get at, by way of example, let me show you. Therefore, let me show you. Do you see the difference in
Yes,
that?
totally.
It's far better presentation. Very comfortable, no notes. Clearly they know their position in their presentation and they own it. And they're talking directly to the owner, right? Yeah.
Okay,
All right. So less than better, less is better, 10 to 20, right in that neck of the woods.
okay,
Average is somewhere between 12 and 15, max.
okay.
Max. All right. Keep that thing small.
When I had 15 slides, I think that was a
That's the one I thought we were at. Yeah, that's-
Can't imagine having 20 slides in 20 minutes. Right. One a minute.
All right. So I gave you a little bit of explanation on slide management. This thing is illuminating 5-10 minutes before the owner gets into the room here. What is the issue at hand with this slide?
The business
It doesn't
is
talk
the-
about the business, it's.
It doesn't, right? It talks about who?
Themselves.
Themselves. That's right. It talks about themselves. You want, to the contrary, somebody walks into the room feeling very uncomfortable. They really do. Very much on the spot. To give them a sense of comfort, at minimum, by illuminating their business. That brings them back into the business, brings them back in the fold, and brings down the threshold of anxiety significantly as they're sitting and waiting for you to collect yourself and get yourself ready with their image up here. It makes a huge difference. It's exactly what we do in the real world of consulting. Exactly what we do. With more money and greater graphics, but it's the same sort of idea, right? So slide number 1 and 2 have been interchanged. In fact, in this case, they weren't even used. Slide number 2 here, 2 in our layout, is introducing yourself. They used it for slide number 1. And they get into what they call their overview. Right off the back, there was a problem with this PowerPoint, showing the final report first, but it's a minor glitch compared to the previous one. Here they're foreshadowing. They're talking about what they want to talk about. I argue, and I've argued for over a decade in teaching this class, that the better presentations are to let the foreshadow follow the issue. Tell me why you think that's has greater meritorious value than this.
Because they know what you're gonna go
Yeah.
over, like, they know the bad stuff, but then you're gonna tell them, oh, but
Yeah,
this
so
is what
let's
we're gonna
just-
go over for the bad
So
stuff.
let's just get it out, right?
The business
It's
owner-
pulling the Band-Aid off.
It is. Excuse me. Yes, Joe?
The business owner knows right away what you found.
Yes, that's
And
right.
then you tell them what you're gonna talk about within those issues.
That's right. And frankly, when they're walking through the door, what are they interested in finding out as soon as possible?
What you found.
That's exactly right.
How you're gonna
Well, you know,
solve
so why keep a Mrs. Smith? It's kind of like my wife. This really bugs me about her. There's some very minor things that bug me about my wife. None of you say this or I'm gonna kick your butt. Totally. Right. But when you're coming in and they're sitting down, they wanna get at it. They wanna get at it, and I'm telling you, the better groups are the ones who make presentations. They get at it early, and especially when you frame it with a balanced scorecard. Really good, really good. So you sort of introducing this additional display with your PowerPoint presentation to introduce them to something that's gonna be extremely problematic for the average entrepreneur. And that's this. You've been exposed to it for 5 weeks, they're gonna be exposed to it for the first time ever. Ever, right? It's like, what the heck is this thing? And that's why it's so important here. If you're gonna spend time anywhere, you spend it right here.
Yeah.
Invest in this. Help them understand it. This is the way this thing works. And you pick up this or that or that. This is why this is important. Or you show well, the way you built it into your PowerPoint presentation. That's how this thing works. So when you pick up an object that's balanced and something isn't, it's really heavy, and you bring that up and you put it out over here and you point it right at this spot here, they know at least 2 of these other ones or 3 of the other ones are fine, and this is what they're gonna stay focused on. And therefore, like a scorecard, you're out of balance, right?
Mhm.
Running a business is keeping score. Do you keep score in your business? Yeah, lots of analogs you can use to get at the balanced scorecard, but the very good groups do that. So this begins to tell everybody a little bit about what you're going to talk about early on, rather than sitting back and enjoying the show by way of analogy. This happens to be my particular hang-up. The point is, I think it makes for a better presentation to do this a little bit later and discuss the issue very, very quickly. Now, what's the problem with this?
Should have been on number 1.
What's that?
Should have been on the first one. First slide.
Okay, so that's a very good statement. Well, let's talk about why that might be a little bit problematic. Think about it for just a second. First, who's your audience? Who's your audience?
He knows all this stuff.
So-
The owner. If the owner is your audience,
That's
are you going to spend talking to him or her about what they already know, or about what they want to hear and know? Do they already know this?
Yes.
Is there any reason to be talking about any of these things, right? If they know and anybody can really get at this right away. No, this is sort of redundant. Grand opening, the location, Spanish, and I know that. I know this, I know that, and I know my background. I don't need to know more about me than I already know, right? So don't make this mistake thinking that you're giving them face by talking about what they already know. Good consultation projects are ones that speak truth, facts, and not fluff it up with stuff. Yeah, Jeff.
I have a question about how the presentations will go. When we give our presentation, is it only going to be our group in the room with the business owners? Is it gonna be all the business owners? What's gonna be the
So
flow of people in the room.
we're gonna schedule that flow next week. We already know who our first group's going to be. It's
Right.
been
So is it
assigned.
gonna be just them and their business owner, or all the other groups gonna be in the room as
All the other
well?
groups will be in the room.
Okay,
They'll be part of the audience, so you'll be able to experience the presentation as other groups. And only the business owner of that business will be in at that time.
okay, the other business
They'll
owners
be
are
out.
not. Okay,
Yeah, for anonymity purposes. Okay.
okay.
So again, we see a problem right into this, very early in this presentation, where they're talking a lot more about who they are than the issue. Now, this is interesting. Not a bad idea, because this gets us closer to what?
Yeah, issue.
Issue, doesn't it? How does this get us closer to the issue?
You can see there.
Right, I think it does a pretty good job of talking about how effective their advertising is, and maybe the clue that they're giving the business owner is part of my problems is, in my chart of accounts, is my expense ratio, marketing to sales. Maybe there's a ratio that's off. They might be thinking about that, or maybe the dollars I'm spending in marketing. Not a bad idea. I have seen some very interesting presentations where, in point of fact, in order to argue the issue, and you have to do it very carefully, but to argue the issue, they brought in surveys very quickly before they got in to talk about what they're gonna talk about. You follow me on that? Not a bad idea, but it takes some skill to do that, even in the real professional world. Why? Because it's tangential. What I mean by that, you're sort of stepping out of the sequence. You're saying parenthetically, by the way, parenthetically, this is why we believe what we believe. We did some surveys, and maybe you'll have somebody in your group talk about the surveys very quickly, and then step out of the parentheses and come back in line to get more linear in the presentation. You follow me on that? It may be better instead to be more linear and have a slide or two in here that talks about your surveys and why the surveys speak all the way back here to this. But the better groups know how to do that, and if you can manage that and do that effectively, it's very effective, but that takes a very strong skill set in the presentation. Okay? So just I'm gonna go through these very quickly, and you can get an idea of some of the things that are positive and some things that are negative here. What are some of the positive stuff that you saw in this presentation?
The comparison between Merit Calendar and that business.
I think that's very good too. What else, some positive things?
Very clear-cut ratio analysis.
What's good about this?
It gives you a visual.
Yeah, very
of the
visual.
differences.
Yeah, you want to take a look at slides that use pie charts very nicely. This group did a good job. This is not an easy thing to do. Somebody in your group has to have some skill set in Excel to be able to do this, or in Keynote to be able to do it, or what's the Mac one? It's not Keynote. Numbers. Thank you, to be able to do this.
What's really nice about that graphic is there are two things to look at. It's very quick and easy to distinguish what they're talking about and get the information from what it shows.
Yes, I think it is too. It's not too complicated.
It's not cluttered.
It isn't, and your tendency will be to do that. I think what this group does a good job of, frankly, is using these kinds of tools. This is a very good one as well. We saw this right off the bat, didn't we?
Yeah.
Right off the bat. You want to then look at sort of a best practice slide presentation as it relates to pie charts. This one you should take a look at and move or gravitate towards. Yeah. Somebody in your group has to have some competency, or should have some competency. If not, then seek someone in your classroom or myself to help you with that, so that you can get to doing these with some degree of competency. So I think what they've done well are those kinds of things. All right, one last example. Let's take a look at Western Shasta here, real fast.
So all of these examples on here are bad examples?
No, I wouldn't say bad. There's examples of
Like some things are better.
presentations that were fairly good, but elements of the presentations that were not real good. And
This first slide. It's not the business, it's the consulting group.
all right, so here we go again, right off the bat here. Slide number 1 is all about, Joe, I think you just said that, didn't you? It's about you and not about them. Don't underestimate slide number 1. It's a bit more difficult than you think it is. Some of you may think it's going to be somewhat simple to go out and take a picture of the business front and then import that image and throw it up here. It looks like crap. One of the things you're going to want to do next week is to do those kinds of things so that when you come in here and you plug your USB jack in here and your PowerPoint shines, you can see what that image looks like on a white screen. So I would advise you, if you're going to spend some time working on this, and I suggest that you do next week, have 3 or 4 or 5 slides to give me some example of what direction you're moving into. It doesn't all have to be done, there's just a few slides. One of those slides should be what image you're going to use in the very beginning. Come up with some different examples. You can import something off the internet, maybe on their web page. That might be worth using. So be very careful if you're going to take an image, a picture of something, and then import it and shine it up here. It just does not look very good. So the slides were somewhat inverted. This would have been a better first slide than the second slide, right? One that's sitting up here as they walked on in. But it has its problems. What are some of the problems in this slide in your view?
It says
The
welcome
shadowing.
to the twice.
Yes, that's right. So right off the bat, what is that telling you with these 3 examples that you want to be thinking about in your group when it comes to slide management? What do you think you should be
That
doing?
not everyone was checking over
Edit.
the.
Pay attention to detail. How can you pay attention to detail?
Proofread.
Proofreading, that's one, and who would be doing the proofreading? One
Yeah.
people, one person?
Everybody.
2 or 3
Everybody.
people.
Everybody in the group have buy-in on this, every single person. You know, send it by way of email attachment and some accountability that goes into whether or not you looked at it, you know, something like that. Yeah, buy-in with everybody on this, not just one person or 2 people.
They
It's
also
like-
have 2 of the same picture on it,
That's right, that's an issue as well.
and the shadows make it kind of
Hard to read, doesn't it?
complicated.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Turtle.
Oh no.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's a bit problematic, isn't it?
Yeah.
What? Now I want to know what it said.
So this is getting cutesy with 3D up on top there, and you can do that shadowing, you can see the problems with that, right?
Yeah.
It's not clear.
No, it's not. It may look good on your computer, but it doesn't look very good when it's on a white screen.
That looks way better.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, so what's the problem with this thing right off the bat?
Hard to read.
It's an overview of the
telling you
business
Yeah.
so far.
What a balanced scorecard
Created in the
kind of
early
is
90s.
and not
That's
what a
telling them what
balanced
they
score
already
actually
know.
is.
Well, there's some good things
No,
and
there's
bad
not.
things about this right off the bat. It's one thing to use your slide management time to talk about a balanced scorecard, but it's another thing to talk about a balanced scorecard using this information, not using slide management. In my view, I think you're a lot better off eliminating this lingo up here and incorporating it in your presentation. It's very easy to do when you're peeling back, by way of example, again, I'll show you this next week with that POD, peeling back and getting at this thing and taking 10, 15 seconds and talking about where it came from, and why it's important, and how many businesses have used it. You can do that very quickly, but to spend time up here and do that doesn't make any sense. Right? So don't rely on your slides to talk about this. Rely on someone in your group who knows this very well and can talk about it. And if you want to bring up the authors of this, born out of Harvard University, you're welcome to do that. If you want to talk about how many businesses use this, all that data is available on the internet. Be very careful, because most of your time is going to get at the issue of the solutions and not too much about the tools you're using. All right. So this group worked pretty hard at getting slide management, getting at this issue here fast, and getting at this issue as well. And they decided to take one of the quadrants and put it on the up here. Now there's some pros and cons in doing this. What do you think the con is? Let's talk about the con and taking one of the perspectives of the balanced scorecard. And
You're only looking at one section of the card, so you can't really compare it to what the other areas are.
all right, so that might be one problem. It's hard to contrast and compare. What would be another issue of it?
You
I think it doesn't really
automatically
mean
think that's a bad
anything.
thing.
What?
I think to me it doesn't mean anything. If I'm a business owner, I look at it, I'm like, I'm not following you.
Yeah, right off the bat, particularly if you had no context, you went right smack in this. It's like, okay, for our next slide, looky. Right. There's a lot of problems with it. It's something that you are understanding, you get at, but boy, it is hard to get someone back there to understand that, right? And Franklin said, if you can't explain something to an 8-year-old or 6-year-old, right, then you really don't understand what you're talking about. Make sure you do understand this well enough so that you don't have to rely on this, but contrarily, you can rely on yourself to explain it. Listen, you're gonna have to frame it. Think of a balanced scorecard. I've told you this. It's a 4-cylinder motor. I told you that, right? Well, some people may not know what a 4-cylinder motor is, right? But a motor has 4 cylinders in it. It's firing. When they all are firing, you know, that motor, that car is moving along beautifully. But one of those cylinders is not. You're going to have smoke coming out the back. It's not going to be performing well. Your gas mileage is going to go down, and you may not get to point B. And that's a problem. While everybody else is passing you up, and everyone else can be your competition. Some of you are going to break down on the highway, you know. So that's an analog to talk about a scorecard. It's one example. You're not going to use that unless you're in the automotive industry. Now, you guys might use something close to that in the chrome industry, trucking industry. You may come up with something that's comparable to that. But I'm telling you right now, if you're able to do that orally with a tool, then when you do something like that, that makes sense. In my view, the better way to do this, if you're going to do this, is to bring these images in, bring these perspectives in, you know, maybe one at a time. It gives you an opportunity to talk about that. But I wouldn't rely too much on PowerPoint to do that. Let your book do a lot of that for you, and you do it. Okay? Your temptation is going to be to fill this thing up. Your temptation is going to be to fill slides up and bring anything and everything in there. The better ones don't do that. The better ones get an introduction, get about themselves, talk about the issue, work through the issue, come to some recommendations, and conclude. Minimum amount of slides, everybody owning the presentation. It's a beautiful thing in the world of consultation. And if you want greater and more information, as good consultants would say, we produce something here that will answer a lot of your questions. Again, my expectation is you're going to have nice tabs here. You're going to have a cover, you're going to have a back, and you're going to spiral bound it. You can have this done anywhere. Spiral bound covers and back plates put on them. Very inexpensive to do that. Very inexpensive to do that. You should have a nice cover page.
How many do we need of those books?
2 of these, thank you, good question. One for who and who else?
One for the
One for
customer.
here, one for the consultant.
That's what we'll go for you.
That's correct. So one for myself and one for your client. You know, a nice presentation page. And then start getting into these, getting into your argument. Members First is way up there. And what they did, of course, and a vested partner in this whole deal in their group. But a nice first page, and then tabbed, and then right into it. Don't underestimate this. This has to be done well. Okay? Do this well. Spend a little bit of money, prorate that out amongst your group members. It's not that expensive. Okay. And very quickly, we're going to go through these, give you some ideas of what not to do. So you saw all 4 of these quadrants illuminated before they even got here, and then finally they get at this. Even if you didn't have that graphic in the middle there, this would be one busy slide. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. One busy slide, and by getting at this the way that this group got at it, it lends itself to all kinds of problems in comprehending and the person who's the business owner really getting at this. Less of this, more focusing on the issue. Now, of the groups, of those of you who are feeling comfortable with your presentation so far, Joe, your group. The 4 quadrants of the balanced scorecard, how many of them do you think sitting here tonight are at issue?
2,
2 of them. And what sitting here tonight would those issues be?
internal business perspectives and finance.
Very good. You guys' group, sitting here tonight, over here, what issues in the balanced scorecard are out of balance in your view? Just sitting here tonight, doesn't have to be written in stone, but just what do you think? Don't know. Okay, we need to get at that very, very quickly. The other group, issues. The balanced scorecard, which the balanced scorecard characteristics are, perspectives are running right or not, if you know sitting here tonight.
We'll know tomorrow. We have our interview scheduled for them tomorrow.
But
so.
any gut feel sitting here tonight of the 4 that might be an issue? Hard to tell?
Yeah, just from what information that we have
I'm gonna say
so far.
I'm gonna say financials are probably pretty good. I'm thinking.
Gut feel for you guys? Gut feel over here?
I'm gonna
Of
say.
the 4 perspectives,
I'm gonna say
customer, employee,
and-
internal, financial, employee, gut feel, employee, gut feel at all?
Yeah, I think internal and,
Internal? All right.
yeah, I think internal.
You might sort of gravitate towards that if you feel that's the case. I would not want you to use any time on slide management for your SWOT analysis. That's a function of your book. Then your time in your book to do that. There's no need to spend time doing it up here. This gets at the solution. This gets at the last part of the slides here. I'm going to talk more about the last part and the middle part of your slides next week. Tonight I want you to be focused on your first 4 slides. That's what I'm really going to be looking at. What are your first 4 going to look like? Somebody build it, get your wallpaper built, and some of your graphics, ideas with graphics that you want to incorporate. Bring in your USB jump drive, plug it in here. Let's take a look at it and talk about it. If you can nail the first 4, it'll prime your pump to get the rest done. And then I'll help you with slides 5 through 12, 15, whatever it is you're going to do. That will be my job working with you next week, so that you are feeling fairly comfortable about that, including getting at the solution and why the solutions would make sense. A lot of ratios here, so we'll talk about a little bit later. Reliance on grant funding, a lot of money, a lot of numbers here. You see some issues here, don't you?
Random shallow.
Yeah, right, Well-
They keep changing the fonts back and forth
that's
too.
right.
It's nice.
Yeah, so, right off the bat, you don't have to be a undergrad in managerial accounting to recognize that at minimum level for slide stuff, it's problematic, right? Okay, so on all of these, there's some examples of very, very good stuff. Pie charts, for example, some fairly decent graphics. But there are more examples of things you want to pay attention to, not to do, right? So you want to be careful with that. My expectation again for next week is what? What is it? What do I expect from you? 4 slides of that. At minimum, you should have identified no later than next week what your issues are, what perspectives are out of alignment, and what some of the solutions might be. So tonight we're going to talk more about that when I spend time with each of you. Make sure we'll do that. All right, so let's take a break at 7 o'clock. Come back here in about